4.5 billion years ago, this planet was not blue. It was black, molten, violent, and unfinished. Yet even then, in the heart of chaos, chemistry was learning the language of life. Hydrogen met oxygen, carbon danced with nitrogen. Out of fire came water. Out of collisions came balance. For millions of years, rain fell without pause, enough to fill every ocean 1,000 times. Each drop carried memory, the minerals of stars, the dust of worlds that came before ours. In the dark ocean, heat and chemistry began to experiment. Molecules joined hands, patterns repeated, and somewhere, one of them learned to copy itself. That was the first ancestor, not of humanity, but of all breath. From single cells came colonies, from colonies came oxygen, and from oxygen, sky. The planet began to glow blue. For the first time, sunlight touched a living world. Forests grew without names. Creatures rose without fear. And for nearly 3 billion years, life only knew one thing: to persist. But the history of Earth is written not just in creation, but in erasure. Every few 100 million years, the planet resets the clock. Ice, fire, silence, then renewal. From extinction, life begins again. Smaller, smarter, quieter. Until one day, a creature looked up and realized the stars were not gods, but history. It was the moment the planet became aware of itself, the moment the Earth began to dream, through us. Tonight, you'll drift backward through that story. Through oceans older than light. Through mountains that once walked. Through the forgotten facts of the ancient Earth. Welcome, dreamer of distant ages. This is Nightfall Travels, where we drift through the science of wonder, the calm of knowledge, and the beauty of what was almost forgotten. If you enjoy these slow journeys into the sleeping mind of the universe, I invite you to subscribe, not as a gesture, but as a quiet joining of this small circle of curiosity. And if you'd like, whisper your location, your time, your sky down in the comments below, so that somewhere in the soft distance, someone else may see it and feel a little less alone under the same stars. Now, let's take a breath together. In, slowly, and out. Let the noise of your day dissolve like footprints in shifting sand. Again, inhale gently through the nose, holding the air like a fragile pearl, and exhale, long and unhurried, until the world outside fades into silence. You are safe here, resting inside the story of the Earth. The Earth you walk upon tonight was once a stranger. Long before forests, before oceans filled, our planet was a molten sphere glowing against the black of space. At that time, the sky wasn't blue. It was copper and ash, filled with vaporized rock and lightning storms that never ceased. Scientists believe the young Earth was struck repeatedly by enormous bodies drifting through the solar system. One of them, Theia, as they call it, collided with such violence that a portion of Earth's outer layers was flung into orbit. Over millions of years, that debris gathered itself into a single, silent companion, our moon. It's a comforting thought that even chaos can create something gentle. Every night the moon drifts across our sky. We are seeing the memory of a wound healed by gravity, some ancient violence turned into silver peace. Imagine standing there in that long ago world. The air too thick to breathe, the sky glowing with fire, the ground trembling with molten tides. And somewhere, amid the roaring chaos, the beginning of oceans waiting to be born. It's strange to think that water, the very substance that carries you and me, was once a cosmic traveler. Some came from volcanic steam. Some, scientists believe, arrived frozen inside comets that crashed into the newborn planet. Each collision added a drop to the ocean we now call home. When you hold a cup of water, you're holding the residue of ancient starlight. It has moved through clouds, through rivers, through blood and bone, again and again, across 4 billion years. Pause for a moment. Let that thought ripple through you. Every sip, every breath, every tear, older than mountains, older than light itself. As Earth cooled, continents began their slow drift. They were not fixed, but floating on a restless sea of magma. The first supercontinent, Valbara, formed about 3 billion years ago. Later came others, Ur, Kenorland, Rodinia, Gondwana, Pangaea. Each one gathered, broke apart, and reformed in an endless dance. The very land beneath your feet once lay beneath alien skies, connected to distant shores that no longer exist. Geologists call this the Wilson cycle, the rhythm of continents forming and fragmenting over hundreds of millions of years. It's a heartbeat you can't hear, but it moves everything. Mountains, oceans, even climate. Earth is not still. It breathes, though its lungs are made of stone. Imagine that vast motion as something alive. A slow inhale as continents drift together, a long exhale as they pull apart. Even now, the Atlantic Ocean widens by about 2 centimeters each year, barely perceptible. But over eternity, it reshapes worlds. Beneath that surface, the ancient Earth kept secrets even more profound. The crust we know today is a thin skin, less than 1% of the planet's volume. Below lies the mantle, a slow, convecting sea of rock that moves like honey. And deeper still, the core, an ocean of molten iron and nickel spinning at thousands of kilometers per hour. That spinning heart creates our magnetic field, shielding us from cosmic radiation. Without it, the atmosphere would have long been stripped away. So in a sense, every compass is a memory of that hidden storm. Each time a needle points north, it is aligning with the invisible breath of Earth's iron soul. And though we rarely think of it, that field hums and flickers with astonishing complexity, sometimes weakening, sometimes reversing entirely. Indeed, magnetic reversals have happened many times in our planet's history. There were eras when compasses, if they had existed, would have pointed south. Some say these shifts take thousands of years. Others suggest they can occur far more rapidly. What we know for certain is that the field always returns, like a deep inhale after a long and silent pause. Let that reassure you tonight. Even the planet itself forgets its direction from time to time, only to find its way again. The earliest life, if we can call it that, was born in the oceans soon after the crust cooled enough for stability. Simple cells, fragile but persistent, living off the heat of hydrothermal vents deep under the sea. There, in total darkness, minerals and heat created a chemistry of possibility. It was a world of black smoke, shimmering vents, and strange bacteria feeding on sulfur instead of sunlight. Some theories suggest that even now, in those same depths, descendants of that first spark still thrive, unchanged across billions of years. Every bubble rising from the sea floor carries a fragment of that memory, the breath of the first living world. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine drifting through that primeval ocean. No sound, no light, only the distant hum of the planet's core, and the soft bloom of microbial life beginning to dream. You are floating in the dark cradle of all existence. And when you walk the shores of any sea today, when you hear the slow breaking of waves or feel the salt wind on your skin, you are standing on the edge of that same memory. Every grain of sand once a fragment of volcanic glass. Every gust of wind, a faint echo of a planet still cooling from birth. How many forgotten facts lie hidden beneath our everyday lives? Perhaps the most humbling truth is this: that nothing here is new. We are walking inside an ancient story, written in water and stone, still unfolding beneath our feet. Breathe softly. Let that awareness settle deep into you. The past is not gone. It is layered quietly beneath the present. And as we continue this journey together, we will begin to uncover the rest. The lost continents, the vanished seas, the forgotten forests, and the strange, luminous creatures that once ruled them all. But for now, let your thoughts drift, like ash upon an ancient tide. The earth is still turning, and you are part of its long, unbroken dream. The ocean remembers before memory itself. If you could dissolve into its depth, you would drift among ghosts of ages when life was no more than chemistry, a shimmer between matter and meaning. There, in the dark, the first spark did not roar into existence. It whispered, a whisper that said, "Endure." Scientists call it abiogenesis, the moment non-living molecules learned how to copy themselves. No one knows exactly how it happened. Perhaps lightning struck a warm, mineral-rich pool. Perhaps vents on the ocean floor pulsed with energy and raw elements. But somewhere, amid iron and heat and water, the first cell took shape. It was not intelligent, not even aware. Yet it held within it the potential to one day gaze back at the stars. Imagine that. 4 billion years ago, a microscopic bubble of life floated in a sea of chaos. And inside it slept the dream of everything. Forests, whales, human laughter, the warmth of your own breath right now. That tiny beginning learned to divide, to cling, to merge. And in that merging came the next great miracle: cooperation. When some cells swallowed others instead of destroying them, a fragile peace formed within their walls. From that truce, complex life began. The mitochondria in every cell of your body are descendants of those ancient alliances. They still burn oxygen as they once did in the primordial sea, turning breath into energy. The same fire that keeps your heart moving tonight. So when you breathe, you are performing an echo of that first union. A conversation that began billions of years ago, between predator and prey, between chaos and harmony. As the eons unfolded, life found rhythm. Cyanobacteria, tiny thread-like beings, learned how to harness sunlight. Through photosynthesis, they began to fill the oceans with oxygen. It took nearly 2 billion years, but eventually the balance tipped, and Earth's skies turned blue for the first time. This event, known as the Great Oxidation, was both a creation and a catastrophe. Oxygen was poison to most life at the time. Entire ecosystems vanished. But out of that quiet extinction came possibility. Oxygen forged new metabolisms, new paths for energy. It also formed ozone, the invisible shield that now guards our world from ultraviolet light. Pause and think of that transformation. A planet suffocating in its own success, then slowly learning to breathe again. Even destruction can be a form of evolution. And as the seas brightened, the colors of life began to bloom. Fossils from those early ages show microbial mats that rippled like silk across shallow coasts. Soft greens, ochres, even purples, painted by the pigments of single-celled artists. If you could stand there, on the shore of that infant world, the air would hum with metallic scent, the light dim, golden through haze, and beneath your feet, the ground would pulse with life, invisible to the eye. Each step would sink into a living tapestry, a blanket of cells weaving the future, one breath at a time. From those quiet carpets of life emerged something stranger still. Around 600 million years ago, after another long global freeze, the first multicellular creatures began to appear. The Ediacaran biota, soft-bodied organisms that looked like leaves, discs, or rippled cushions on the sea floor. They had no eyes, no bones, no mouths. Some may have absorbed nutrients through their skin. Others simply drifted, anchored like petals in slow current. They were silent, slow, and utterly alien. Yet they represent the ancestors of everything that moves today. One fossil, Dickinsonia, resembles a quilted oval, a meter long, patterned with gentle ridges like the fingerprints of the planet itself. Another, Sprigina, has a faint head and symmetrical segments, perhaps the first whisper of what would one day become motion, sensation, and direction. We don't know how they lived or how they saw the world, but perhaps they didn't need to see. Perhaps they felt the ocean around them the way we feel warmth or sorrow, as texture, as flow, as belonging. Let that image settle in you. A slow field of living forms swaying in the dim light, the ocean floor like a breathing garden. No conflict, no hunger, only movement and stillness interwoven. A perfect lullaby for a restless world. But evolution never stays still. In time, the Ediacaran peace gave way to hunger, and hunger gave rise to innovation. During what scientists call the Cambrian explosion, life diversified in a surge so sudden it seemed almost impatient. Creatures developed shells, claws, eyes. Predators emerged. The ocean turned into a vast experiment in survival. Yet, even amid that competition, beauty thrived. Trilobites with jeweled carapaces, anomalocarids gliding like ghosts through coral gardens, and early fish with translucent skin, their gills glowing faintly with each breath. In that ancient sea, evolution became artistry. Every shape, every symmetry, every hue, a reflection of energy seeking form. And perhaps this is one of those forgotten facts worth remembering, that the pattern of struggle and beauty, creation and loss, has always been there, not as punishment, but as rhythm. Even the coral reefs today, those fragile cathedrals of life, are direct descendants of that Cambrian creativity. Every pulse of color beneath the waves is a memory of the first beings who learned to dance with sunlight. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine descending into that sea. The water cool and heavy, light filtering down in trembling shafts, strange creatures drifting in slow motion, shells glinting, tentacles curling in lazy spirals. You hover, weightless, as if time itself has softened. You can almost hear the ocean breathing. Far above, continents shift again. Volcanoes exhale clouds of ash and iron. Rains fall, carrying minerals into the sea. Each drop changes the balance, nudging the chemistry of life 1 degree closer to what we know now. From simple beginnings, the first reefs rise, built not by coral yet, but by cyanobacteria and sponges. These stony mounds shelter life in miniature. Tiny shrimps, worms, and translucent fish flicker between shadows. The ocean has learned how to build homes, and in building, it dreams of community. That dream continues even now. In every tide pool, every droplet that holds a living cell. Each one an echo of that original design. Diversity as survival, unity as strength. Tonight, as you rest, you are held by that same lineage. Your heartbeat traces its rhythm from tides older than time. Your breath repeats the motion of ancient waves. The calcium in your bones was once coral, the iron in your blood, once star-born dust. All that you are was gathered from forgotten seas, stitched together by time and temperature and chance. And as you drift toward sleep, imagine yourself returning there, to the warm dark, the gentle pulse, where every living thing begins again. The ocean cradles you. Its memory hums in your veins. And in the next part of our journey, we will follow that tide forward, onto the first shores, where life began to crawl from water to land. And the earth itself learned to walk. For millions of years, the ocean was enough. It was cradle, shelter, boundary, and home. But something within life kept reaching, an invisible restlessness. Perhaps it was hunger or light or simple chance. Whatever it was, it drew the living world toward a new frontier. Long before humans walked the earth, the first pioneers rose from the sea, not in triumph, but in slow, trembling effort. Every inch gained on dry ground was a small defiance against gravity, a rebellion written in patience. Scientists have traced these beginnings to the Devonian period, some 400 million years ago. At that time, the continents were barren. No grass, no birds, no hum of insects. Only wind of rock and the endless whisper of waves. Then came the plants. Tiny, fragile at first, little more than moss clinging to damp stone. They spread in filaments, threads of green that drank sunlight and anchored themselves into soil that was not yet soil. Through their roots, they began to carve the land, breaking stone into sediment, releasing minerals that would one day feed forests. That was the first transformation, the earth breathing above the sea for the first time. Around those early plants came new visitors, arthropods, the ancestors of insects and spiders, ventured out to feed on decaying algae. They were armored, jointed, and cautious. Their limbs pressed tentative prints into soft mud, the earliest footsteps ever left on land. One fossil trackway found in Ireland, dating back nearly 385 million years, shows the path of such a creature. Each mark perfectly preserved, like a signature left by curiosity itself. Imagine it. A primitive centipede or scorpion-like creature, pausing under a blood-red sky, its carapace glistening with seawater, the air heavy and strange. Around it, the wind carried nothing but silence. No bird song, no leaves rustling, only the pulse of its own fragile heart. It didn't know it was part of a revolution. It was simply exploring. And yet, that exploration changed everything. Soon after, life followed in waves. Larger plants evolved. Ferns and horsetails, their fronds unfurling toward the sky. They built forests where none had existed. Their roots knit the ground together. And for the first time, the land turned green. This new world created something Earth had never known before: shade. Beneath it, the air thickened with humidity and scent. and small rivers meandered through living canopies. Every leaf was a new invention, each one capturing sunlight, exhaling oxygen, changing the atmosphere again. Oxygen levels soared, reaching nearly 35%, far higher than today. It made insects grow enormous. Dragonflies the size of hawks skimmed the forest air, their wings shimmering in prehistoric light. Spiders grew as large as dinner plates, their webs trembling with golden mist. It was a strange, alien Eden, lush, heavy, and almost dreamlike. The soundscape of that era would have been otherworldly. The hiss of wind through fronds, the low groan of shifting trees, the bubbling of streams over stone untouched by footsteps. Every sound was new, a world rehearsing its first symphony. And then came the moment that changed destiny. Fish began to crawl. The boundary between sea and land blurred in the shallow deltas. There, in sunlit mud, creatures evolved fins sturdy enough to bear weight. They used them to prop, then to push, until one day they no longer needed water's support at all. Fossils like Tiktaalik show this transition with astonishing clarity. Half fish, half amphibian. Its fins had wrist-like bones, its head could lift above water, its lungs could sip air. It could move between worlds. Picture that creature resting in a tide pool, its gills flaring softly, eyes just above the surface, watching the strange new world of air and sky. What must it have felt? That first gasp of open wind after eternity underwater. Perhaps confusion, perhaps awe, perhaps the same quiet courage you feel when you step into the unknown. Those early amphibians gave rise to many others. Creatures like Acanthostega and Ichthyostega, their bodies awkward but determined. They wriggled through mud, their limbs pressing prints that would one day lead to reptiles, to mammals, to us. Each of those prints is a letter in the story of persistence. Each one says, keep moving, adapt, become. Scientists estimate that it took nearly 30 million years for this transition to complete. From water to land, a slow-motion miracle written in bones and breath. And through that time, Earth itself changed with them. Rains carved rivers, rivers carried nutrients, and the planet began to hum with cycles of growth and decay. For the first time, there was soil, living soil, a skin of microbes, fungi, and roots intertwined. The Earth had learned to regenerate itself. But evolution is never without sacrifice. As new species rose, others vanished. The Devonian ended with one of Earth's great extinctions, perhaps triggered by cooling, perhaps by oxygen depletion in the seas. Nearly 75% of marine life disappeared. Coral reefs collapsed. Whole lineages were erased before they had names. Yet, even in that silence, life endured. From the survivors came resilience, organisms better suited for change, seeds that could sleep through drought, animals that could breathe both water and air. Extinction, it seems, was not an ending, but a pause in the rhythm. A long inhale before the next creation. And that next creation was breathtaking. Out of the surviving lineages, the first true forests spread. Trees reached toward the sun, their trunks thick with lignin, a substance so strong, even bacteria struggled to break it down. When those trees fell, they didn't rot easily. They layered upon one another for millions of years. And under heat and pressure, they became the coal we burn today. So, when a flame flickers in the dark, it is the light of ancient forests glowing once more. every spark a memory of that green age. Life had conquered the land. The planet that once glowed red and empty now shimmered with leaves and rivers. The air was sweet with oxygen, the ground alive with movement. Close your eyes and picture that landscape. Giant dragonflies drifting through mist, ferns taller than houses, streams glinting beneath golden canopies. A calm world, pulsing with quiet vitality, not yet ours, but dreaming us into being. And as night falls across that ancient forest, you can almost hear the first chorus of frogs, soft and rhythmic, calling across the stillness. A lullaby older than humanity itself. Drift with them now. Let your mind follow the sound, through branches and mist into the next age, when reptiles would rise, and the earth would become a stage for giants. The earth had learned to build vertically. What began as moss and root now reached into the clouds. From coast to continent, the surface of the planet transformed. A tide of green spilling over rock and valley, filling the silence with the hush of leaves. It was the Carboniferous period, a time when forests rose like cathedrals, their canopies stretching hundreds of feet above ground, their trunks wrapped in ferns and fungi, their air so dense with oxygen it could almost be felt. This was the world's great inhale, a moment when the balance of life tipped toward abundance. Breathe in with it. Imagine air so rich that every breath tingled in your lungs, where each flame burned brighter, each insect grew larger, and sound itself carried differently, softer, slower, through the heavy, perfumed air of creation. The first great forests were unlike any we know. Towering lepidodendron trees, their bark patterned like reptile skin, their crowns splitting into fan-like leaves. Around their roots grew calamites, ancestors of modern horsetails, hollow and jointed, stretching 10 meters tall like green bamboo. Beneath them, ferns unfurled in fractal symmetry, their fronds glistening with dew as wide as your hand. And in the dim undergrowth, mosses drank from pools of amber light. The ground was soft, a thick layer of peat and fallen bark, spongy and alive with insects. Millipedes longer than your arm, spiders the size of birds, and shimmering dragonflies with wingspans nearly a meter across. Their name was Meganura. When they flew, the air itself rippled, a slow, steady thrumming that sounded like the beat of the planet's heart. They hunted smaller insects near the forest canopy, their eyes glittering like emerald mirrors. Imagine standing in that place. The light filtering through fern fronds, a green dusk even at noon. You hear the soft crackle of insects moving in the litter, the distant croak of amphibians, the faint metallic whisper of dragonfly wings above. It is alien and familiar at once, a forgotten dream of abundance. Below the soil, another world thrived. Networks of fungi, the first mycorrhizal webs, wove through the ground, linking roots together. They traded nutrients, communicated stress, and distributed energy across the forest. This hidden system still exists today, though we seldom think of it. Every tree you've ever seen is part of a silent conversation, a slow exchange of carbon and wisdom beneath your feet. Some scientists call it the Wood Wide Web. But in those early forests, it was the world's original internet, built not from silicon and wire, but from patience and symbiosis. Reflection. We often imagine intelligence as something found only in minds. But perhaps it also lives in the soil, in the quiet decisions made by roots and fungi, cooperating across time. In that sense, the forest is a living thought, a slow awareness breathing through generations. But nature, ever balanced, began to shift again. The very process that made this world so lush also sealed its fate. The trees that grew so tall were made of lignin, a complex polymer no organism could yet digest. When they fell, they did not rot quickly. They accumulated, layer upon layer, trapping carbon underground. Over millions of years, pressure and heat transformed that carbon into coal, the black archives of sunlight. Every coal seam on Earth is a page from that age, a fossilized breath of the ancient forests. When we burn it, we are releasing that sunlight once more. Ancient air, freed from time's long vault. Let that sink in. The glow of a campfire, the warmth of a light bulb, the hum of a city at night, all powered by forests that died 300 million years ago. We live in the second life of trees. As the Carboniferous age deepened, amphibians ruled the swamps. Their bodies were sleek and wide, their eyes golden and patient. They hunted in still water, their movements slow, deliberate, as though even time bowed to their calm. One of them, Eogyrinus, stretched nearly 5 meters long, half crocodile, half salamander, a predator of patience and silence. In the shallows, smaller amphibians clung to reeds, their lungs tasting air between ripples. And among them, quietly, something new emerged. Creatures that laid eggs not in water, but on land. Reptiles. This small innovation changed everything. Freed from the need to return to the sea, they spread across the land like whispers. Their eggs, sealed and self-contained, were tiny worlds, each one an ocean within a shell. It is humbling to realize that every birth, every heartbeat, still follows that ancient design. We are all echoes of those first eggs, sealed pockets of life daring to exist away from the water. The air grew drier, the continents shifted, forests rose and fell like tides. And in the spaces between, new ecosystems took root. Vast wetlands, dense jungles, and high plateaus rich with oxygen and song. Life filled every corner. Even the night belonged to it now. Fireflies blinked their first lights, bioluminescence pulsing like thought. A reminder that even darkness can glow. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the rhythm of that age. The drip of dew on leaves, the rustle of fronds, the sigh of wind moving through forests that no longer exist. It is the sound of the planet breathing, a reminder that Earth's pulse has always been steady, rising, falling, sleeping, waking. But balance, as always, carries change. Toward the end of this lush era, the climate began to shift once again. Oxygen levels fell, the air grew thinner and cooler, and many of the great insects and amphibians dwindled. Forests receded, leaving behind open plains and drying rivers. It was not death, but transition. From the green hush of the Carboniferous to the fire and dust of the Permian, from swamp to savanna, from breath to struggle. And in that struggle, new creatures would rise. Stronger lungs, thicker skin, sharper minds. They would dominate the Earth for more than 150 million years. But tonight, before we follow them into the age of reptiles, pause here in the stillness of that green world. Breathe once more with it, in and out. The same air, the same rhythm, the same dream carried across epochs of stone and light. Let the forest breathe around you. Let the memory of its canopy sway above your thoughts. And as you drift deeper into calm, know that you are inhaling the long echo of a world that once lived in perfect harmony with itself. The forests that once whispered now crackle. Swamps dry into plains. Rivers shrink into veins of dust. The air, once sweet with oxygen, turns dry and electric. It is the late Carboniferous, slipping into the Permian, an age when Earth began to exhale heat. The continents have drawn together again, locked in a slow embrace that forms a single, colossal landmass, Pangaea. A world where deserts could stretch from horizon to horizon, where storms carved continents and winds carried the breath of one ocean to the far edge of another. From above, it would have looked like an alien planet, one side baked under endless sun, the other shrouded in cold and night. The perfect stage for a new kind of creature, not fragile, not fleeting, but enduring. Reptiles, scaled, self-contained, and patient. They were built for dryness, their skin conserving moisture, their eggs armored against thirst. They did not need the sea to survive anymore. They were Earth's first true conquerors of land. One of the earliest among them was Dimetrodon, often mistaken for a dinosaur, though it lived long before. It prowled the red plains with a sail rising from its back, a tall, spined fin that caught the sun and regulated its blood. Some scientists believe it warmed itself in the morning, then turned its sail away to cool by dusk. Others think it used the fin for display, a signal of strength, a whisper of fear. In either case, Dimetrodon was an emblem of adaptation. Its jaws were lined with serrated teeth, its eyes forward-facing, its stride low and deliberate. A quiet predator in a quiet world. Imagine it walking through a shallow canyon of cracked stone, its breath rising in the morning chill, its sail glowing like amber in the dawn light. The wind moves dust across its path, and in that stillness, you can almost hear the earth recalibrating. The pulse of evolution adjusting to a new tempo. Beneath that blazing sky, the seas still held mysteries of their own. Massive fish called xenacanthus swam in freshwater rivers, their bodies eel-like and their fins rippling like smoke. Ammonites, distant relatives of squid, spiraled through the open oceans in shells of perfect geometry. And deep beneath the waves, forests of coral and sponge glowed faintly in the dim light. But the land had become the true theater now. The amphibians, once dominant, began to fade. Their soft skin cracked in the dry air. Their eggs withered before they could hatch. And so, quietly, they yielded the world to scales. The reptiles diversified quickly. Some grew sleek and agile, their bodies built for running. Others became armored, their backs covered in bony plates. And among them, small, warm-blooded hunters appeared. Creatures with whiskers, perhaps even primitive fur. They are the ancestors of mammals, our earliest lineage, living in the shadows of giants. They hunted at night, eyes adapted to starlight, hearts small but fierce. In their chests, warmth glowed, a spark that would one day outlast even the dinosaurs. It's strange to think of them now, scurrying beneath ferns under a red sky, while the great reptiles thundered above. They were unnoticed, and yet they carried the blueprint of our own pulse. The Permian Earth was a place of contrast. To the north, vast deserts shimmered under white heat. To the south, jungles thrived in humid swells. Seasons grew sharper, droughts longer, and life responded with resilience. This was the age of endurance. Creatures learning not just to live, but to wait. To slow their hearts when the rains didn't come, to burrow beneath the soil and sleep through hunger. Even the plants adapted, their leaves thicker, their seeds armored against fire and drought. Some scientists believe this was the first age of true ecosystems, where predator, prey, plant, and climate formed intricate cycles. Every extinction, every bloom, a recalibration of balance. The Earth was practicing stability. It was learning how to survive itself. But deep beneath the crust, something stirred. Volcanoes began to cough fire into the air. Lava flowed across what is now Siberia, spreading a fever across the planet. The sky dimmed under soot. Oceans acidified. Temperatures swung wildly, cold to blistering, then back again. This cataclysm unfolded over millions of years, but in geological time, it was a heartbeat. The Great Dying, scientists call it. 90% of marine life, 70% of land species, gone. It was Earth's greatest extinction, the one that nearly erased the script of life altogether. No roar, no explosion, just the slow suffocation of worlds. And yet, even in that darkness, some members remained. A few lineages endured. The hardiest reptiles, the ancestors of future dinosaurs, and the small, patient proto-mammals, still curled in burrows, still breathing faintly under ash. There's a quiet lesson in that survival. The Earth has ended many times, but never completely. It forgets, it burns, it rests, and then it dreams again. Out of the ashes of the Permian came renewal, a planet scrubbed bare and ready to start anew. The Triassic dawn would bring a different kind of life, taller, faster, stranger. Creatures built for sun and wind, for movement and flight. But before we step into that rising age, pause with me here, in the flickering silence after the fire. Picture the red sky dimming to purple, the last embers of volcanoes glowing on the horizon. A lone reptile lifts its head from the dust, its scales faintly silver in the dying light. The world is empty now, but it breathes, and in that breath lies promise. This is the rhythm of Earth. To end, to sleep, to begin again. The Earth slept for a long time after the Great Dying. An age of silence stretched across the continents. Ash settled into rivers, mountains cooled, and for a moment, or perhaps a million years, the world seemed still. But life has a way of whispering itself back. Tiny ferns sprouted between cracks of basalt. In shallow streams, new species of fish flickered through the dusted water. Insects returned first, resilient, tireless, their wings spreading sunlight once more across barren plains. And then, slowly, the reptiles began to emerge again. From burrows, from lagoons, from caves filled with cooled ash, they stretched their limbs toward the pale light of a new world. The Triassic had begun, and with it, a planet awakening from grief. The climate was brutal, hot, dry, unpredictable. Seasons swung from drought to flood, and storms carried red dust that darkened the sun. But perhaps because of that hardship, evolution worked faster here. The survivors were hardy, ingenious, and adaptable. Some reptiles grew small, nimble, running on two legs across the cracked ground. Others returned to the sea, reshaping their bodies into sleek, finned hunters. One group, long-necked, paddle-limbed creatures called nothosaurs, glided through coastal waters like silent ghosts, their movements slow and deliberate, their eyes always turned upward toward the shimmering surface. Above them, the air shimmered with heat. And in that heat, new forms began to rise. From a lineage of small, agile reptiles known as archosaurs came two future dynasties, the crocodilians and something far greater, the dinosaurs. Their beginnings were modest. The earliest known among them, Eoraptor, was no bigger than a dog. Slender, fast, its tail balancing its every move like a dancer's arm. It hunted insects, small lizards, and the shadows of opportunity. Fossils suggest that Eoraptor may have been warm-blooded, its metabolism quick, its steps tireless under the fierce Triassic sun. It was not yet the giant of imagination, but it was the spark of what would come. Imagine it darting across a dry riverbed, its toes pressing into soft clay, each step marking the beginning of an empire. Around it, the world hums with heat. Cicadas cry, wind moves through ferns. Every motion, every echo, a prelude to thunder. The first dinosaurs spread quietly at first, competing with the larger reptiles that already ruled. There were strange forms then. Phytosaurs, crocodile-like, but with nostrils high on their heads, lurking in muddy rivers. Rhynchosaurs, squat, beaked herbivores, their jaws built to shear plants that clung to dry ground. And among them, the first real herbivorous dinosaurs, like Plateosaurus. Massive, gentle creatures feeding on cycads and ferns. At over 8 meters long, it stood on hind legs when reaching for leaves, its tail heavy as a counterweight, its eyes calm and deliberate. The forests trembled softly as they fed, each movement a slow rhythm of survival. These were not monsters, but pioneers, the architects of ecosystems that would flourish for over 160 million years. Their steps laid the foundation of balance, predator and prey, plant and soil, sunlight and bone. As vegetation spread across Pangaea once again, so did rivers and lakes. The monsoons returned, filling basins with life. Insects multiplied. Frogs croaked again at dusk. The earth had recovered its song, a new melody, different from the one it had lost. And above it all, a stranger wonder appeared. Flight, not yet birds, but their ancestors. Small gliding reptiles known as Charovipteryx and Queneosaurus leapt from cliffs with skin-stretched membranes, catching the air with awkward grace. They were experiments of physics and evolution, the first sketches of what would one day soar. You can imagine it now. The golden heat of a Triassic sunset, dust swirling through the air, and one small creature leaping from a ledge, its arms outstretched, its shadow gliding across stone. The dream of flight had begun. But this age, like all before it, carried both creation and destruction. The Triassic world was unstable. Its surface cracked with rifts and fractures as the supercontinent began to pull apart. Volcanoes returned, this time painting the sky with veils of fire that stretched for thousands of miles. Ash darkened the stars. The oceans warmed. And once again, extinction came, not as a sudden scream, but as a long, fading sigh. 3/4 of all species vanished. But what followed would define the next age completely: the rise of the true dinosaurs. Those who survived found a world almost empty of competition. They grew larger, faster, more efficient. They spread across continents now drifting apart, their diversity exploding in shapes and colors beyond imagination. The Jurassic was waiting for them. Still, something quiet lingered beneath their shadows. Small furred creatures, our ancestors, kept to the underbrush. They listened. They learned. Their nights were filled with patience. Their eyes reflected starlight instead of sun. They would not rule yet, but they would remember. And perhaps it was that remembering that saved them. A talent not for power, but for endurance. A quiet kind of intelligence born in the margins of survival. As the Triassic faded into the Jurassic, the Earth exhaled again, a slow, deep breath of renewal. Forests thickened, oceans teemed, and the sky, for the first time, filled with the beating of vast leathery wings. Tonight, let that image linger behind your eyelids. A horizon of ancient light. A young dinosaur's shadow stretching across red sand. The faint cry of a glider drifting overhead. You can almost smell the minerals in the air. The petrichor of rain over hot stone. The scent of beginnings. The Earth is not just a planet. It is a memory, always rewriting itself, always dreaming in matter and motion. And now, we will follow that dream into the heart of its most cinematic age. The reign of the giants, when thunder had bones and the sky belonged to wings. The planet was waking into magnificence. Where fire and ash had once reigned, green returned. Wider, deeper, more certain. It was the Jurassic Age, and the Earth had decided to dream in color. Volcanoes still smoldered at the horizon, but their ash became the soil of forests. Moist winds circled the continents that were slowly drifting apart. Rains carved valleys that glimmered like veins of glass. In these fertile corridors, life swelled into scale. The giants had arrived. From the eastern plains of Pangaea's breaking heart came creatures of grace and gravity. Long-necked Diplodocus, stretching 30 meters from head to tail, swayed through fern forests like living bridges. Their necks arched in slow rhythm, their feet pressing craters into the wet ground with every deliberate step. Each inhale drew half a roomful of air. Each exhale misted the morning like breath from a mountain. They moved not with aggression, but with inevitability. Massive, serene, as if carrying the weight of time itself upon their ribs. The sound of them was not thunder, but pulse. A low, steady thum, thum, echoing miles away, reminding the world that gravity had finally met its masterpiece. Around them thrived a community of marvels. Armored stegosaurs, their plates glowing red in sunset light, wandered the undergrowth like walking fortresses. Smaller, clever hunters like Compsognathus darted through shadows, their tiny hands clutching lizards and insects, their golden eyes alive with restless calculation. And then there were the predators of legend. Allosaurus, swift and muscular, its jaw a crescent of knives, its stride balanced and certain. They were the architects of fear, but even they moved with an odd elegance, a dancer's poise wrapped in steel and sinew. Picture the scene. A broad valley at dawn, mist curled low, sunlight breaking through cycads and giant conifers. A herd of Diplodocus feeding in silence. From the tree line, a single Allosaurus watching, motionless, ancient patience in its bones. The air is still enough to hear the hiss of sap in the trunks. A world so enormous it moves in slow time. Above it all, the skies transformed. Where once small gliders had struggled for lift, now true flyers own the air. The pterosaurs, their wings vast membranes of light, soared along ocean cliffs, diving for fish with uncanny precision. Some were small as sparrows, others spanned 10 meters from tip to tip. Their hollow bones sang faintly in the wind, and their cries echoed across coastlines newly divided by drifting seas. Imagine standing on that ancient shore, The surf foams at your feet. Warm wind carries salt and fern scent. And overhead, dozens of pterosaurs circle in sunlight, their shadows sweeping across the rock like brushstrokes on the canvas of the world. You can almost feel the air currents on your skin. The same invisible rivers they rode with ease. Beneath the waves, the ocean was no quieter. Marine reptiles reclaimed the realm their ancestors had left behind. Ichthyosaurs, shaped like dolphins but armored in scales, darted through schools of silver fish. Pliosaurs, immense and deliberate, moved with the dignity of submarines, their flippers carving silence into the sea. Above the coral gardens drifted ammonites, spiral-shelled wanderers, each one a chambered secret of buoyancy and balance. The Jurassic Ocean was a mirror to the land, abundant, shimmering, perilous. Every ripple, every glint of light, a whisper of endless motion. And all the while, the Earth itself was changing shape. The continents of Gondwana and Laurasia began to separate, cracking Pangaea's ancient spine. Rifts filled with newborn seas, their waves glinting like molten glass under alien constellations. The crust sighed and shifted, building new coastlines for creatures yet unborn. Geologists today can still trace those scars. The Atlantic's widening heartbeat, the slow breathing of stone. Perhaps that is one of Earth's forgotten truths. It never truly holds still. Even when we sleep, the ground beneath us drifts a few centimeters closer to tomorrow. Among these giants, the air was thick with plant breath. Conifers towered like spires, cycads clustered like emerald candles, and tree ferns spread canopies so broad that twilight lived beneath them. Dragonflies shimmered through mist. The smell of resin, sap, and rain mingled into something primal and sweet. It was a world humming with chlorophyll and thunder. If you walked through it, you might feel small, but also strangely eternal, because for the first time, the planet had found balance again. Ocean feeding sky, sky feeding rain, rain feeding forest, forest feeding everything that moved beneath it. The system was whole. It was breathing. Yet even this paradise was not free from tension. Nature always writes its harmony in counterpoint. Storms scoured the coasts, volcanoes whispered beneath the soil, and predators tested the peace with each new step. But that balance between danger and wonder is what made the world alive. Without hunger, there is no movement. Without fear, no adaptation. And without change, no beauty that lasts. So the Jurassic Age stretched on. Millions of years of green dominion, of footsteps heavy enough to make the Earth remember. Somewhere beneath the canopy, small mammals still scurried, their hearts racing beneath fur the size of raindrops. They watched from the roots of trees, waiting, learning, dreaming of smaller worlds where they might one day rule. But that time was far away. For now, the giants reigned, and the world was content to let them. Close your eyes and feel their rhythm. The sway of enormous bodies, the sigh of leaves brushing their flanks, the tremor of the ground that was not quake, but heartbeat. You are standing at the center of Earth's long exhale. The air is golden, the day eternal, the dream alive. And soon, the sky itself will change again. Feathers will shimmer where scales once shone, and the gift of flight will evolve not from leather, but from warmth. The next age belongs to those who dare to lift from the ground and never return. The air was changing. It shimmered with dust and heat, carrying the scent of resin and rain. From the green hush of the Jurassic forest rose a different kind of music. The quiet rustle of feathers. Soft at first, barely more than whispers against the wind. But in that fragile sound was the beginning of flight as we know it. A song the earth had been waiting to sing. Long before true birds filled the skies, feathers were already here, not for flight, but for warmth, for display, for identity. Small dinosaurs, covered in downy filaments, ran through ferns under the morning sun. Their bodies shimmered with iridescent color, copper, violet, emerald. Tones meant not for hiding, but for being seen. One such creature, Anchiornis, barely larger than a crow, wore a cloak of gray feathers tipped in red and black. It could glide, perhaps, but more importantly, it could dazzle. Its feathers were language, an ancient vocabulary of light and intention. We often think of evolution as cold or mechanical, but sometimes it is poetry, a slow, extravagant improvisation toward beauty itself. In the dense forests of what is now Germany, something extraordinary was forming. In limestone beds, later called Solnhofen, a fossil would rest for 150 million years, waiting to be discovered. A creature poised perfectly between worlds. Archaeopteryx. It had teeth in its beak, a bony tail like a reptile, clawed fingers still reaching for branches, and yet feathers. True, asymmetrical flight feathers, the kind that shape air into lift. When scientists first saw it, they called it the first bird. But it is more than a first. It is a reminder that boundaries between reptile and bird, between earth and sky, are only temporary illusions. Nature does not draw lines, it blurs them. Imagine it now, a humid morning in the late Jurassic. Fog rises between giant conifers, the forest alive with the pulse of insects. Perched on the low branch, a feathered creature lifts its wings to the dawn. It leaps, not far, not high, just enough for gravity to hesitate. For an instant, it floats. The air holds it like a promise. Then, with a few uncertain beats, it learns the oldest freedom of all. The moment of liftoff, the first miracle of sky. Feathers changed everything. They gave warmth to blood, camouflage to the hunted, and grace to movement itself. They made the air a place to live in, not just pass through. Soon, gliders became flyers, and flyers became singers. The sky filled with color and motion. Plumes, crests, wings catching light at angles that even the sun seemed to pause for. The invention of flight was not conquest. It was joy, a quiet evolution towards elegance. Yet, beneath the clouds, life continued its march. On land, the great sauropod still swayed across valleys, while predators like Allosaurus hunted through mist. But smaller, more agile hunters began to outthink their size. Troodon, with eyes like polished amber and a brain far larger than most reptiles, moved through the shadows with almost mammalian curiosity. Its feathers were fine and close, its movements quick, calculated. Some paleontologists believe it cared for its young, guarded nests, taught its offspring how to hunt. If so, it was one of the first creatures to feel something we might call tenderness. Perhaps the first spark of empathy flickered there, in a nest lined with leaves, under a canopy that smelled of rain. The world above and below was interconnected now. Forests feeding skies, skies feeding seas. Water evaporated, clouds gathered, rains fell with rhythm that shaped entire continents. It was as if Earth itself had found its tempo. And in that balance, mammals continued to wait in silence. They were still small, still nocturnal, their hearts steady beneath fur. While giants thundered and wings flashed above, they listened, they learned, they survived by humility, by patience. Sometimes it is not strength that endures, but gentleness. Then the continents drifted again, seas widened, volcanoes pulsed deep beneath the crust. Each eruption spilled light into the air, fine ash that turned sunsets blood red for years. But life went on, dancing between catastrophe and calm. Each age of the earth seems to understand this truth, that beauty is born from instability. If the world were steady, nothing would ever need to change. But because it quakes, because it burns, life keeps inventing new ways to stay alive. Now, picture this moment. The late Jurassic sky. Golden light pouring through high clouds, a forest edge by a clear lagoon. A feathered creature stands on a fallen trunk, wings lifted, waiting for the right wind. It leaps, a glide, a beat, a rise. The air catches it, and it does not fall. It circles once, twice, its shadow skimming the water below. The earth watches its own creation rise, and for the first time, the planet dreams of flight. The world would never be the same again. And as the next era dawns, the earth will grow wilder still. With continents breaking apart, oceans teeming with predators vast as ships, and skies alive with hunters born of wind and fire. The continents had finally broken apart. Pangaea was gone, shattered into drifting fragments that slid across the molten heart below. The world was no longer one vast land, but many. Islands, peninsulas, and seas glittering between them like pieces of sky that had fallen to earth. It was the Cretaceous, the last and most intricate movement in the symphony of dinosaurs. A world at its height of color, sound, and ferocity. The air was warmer now, rich with humidity and pollen. Rains came often and heavy, turning valleys into marshes, feeding jungles that hummed with insects and song. It was a planet in full bloom. For the first time, flowers appeared, small, delicate, yet world-changing. They lured pollinators with scent and sweetness, and in return, the pollinators, beetles, wasps, and early bees, carried their legacy from petal to petal. This quiet partnership between plant and insect transformed the biosphere more profoundly than any predator ever could. The earth became fragrant, the wind carried color, and all around, life adapted to a new rhythm of beauty. Imagine walking through a Cretaceous meadow, tall cycads swaying, clusters of primitive blooms glowing white and gold. Dragonflies skimming pools of still water, their wings flashing like shards of glass. The air hums, alive with the industry of creation. In that lush abundance, giants still ruled. Argentinosaurus, stretching over 35 meters long, moved through the plains like a moving hill, its neck grazing the tops of trees, its heart beating with the pressure of oceans. Every step was a small earthquake, every breath a fog of steam. Nearby, hunters tracked their scent. Giganotosaurus, sleek and furious, its skull longer than a man is tall. When it walked, its tail counterbalanced its hunger, its eyes fixed not on rage, but on precision. There was no cruelty here, only the inevitability of hunger meeting flesh. A truth as old as light. To watch such creatures was to understand stillness. The world was not made for haste. Even the violence of the Cretaceous moved with rhythm. a slow heartbeat under the skin of time. The oceans, too, had transformed into kingdoms of motion. Vast inland seas split the continents, turning what is now North America into archipelagos of shimmering blue. In these waters swam leviathans of grace and terror. Mosasaurus, with jaws longer than a boat, patrolled the depths like a shadow made of teeth. Its body moved with the sinuous control of a serpent, its flippers slicing water like knives of glass. Above, pteranodons soared, their wingspans longer than a car, their cries cutting through salt wind. They dove for fish with breathtaking precision, their beaks breaking the surface like arrows. And deeper still, the cephalopods, ammonites, belemnites, coiled through the gloom, their tentacles feeling the memory of eras long gone. The sea was the planet's bloodstream, pumping life across the continents in unseen currents. Meanwhile, the Earth's climate teetered between warmth and fire. Volcanoes seethed beneath the Pacific Rim, pouring carbon into the sky. The atmosphere thickened with greenhouse heat. Yet this warmth fueled the bloom. The jungles of what is now South America, the conifer forests of Asia, the mangrove deltas of Africa. Everywhere, life reached upward. Birds, true birds now, took to the sky with feathers shaped by precision, their songs thin and clear in the humid air. They nested in branches, built homes from twigs and resin, and raised their young beneath the gaze of stars that had watched 1,000 extinctions already. There is something deeply human about them. Even then, a softness amid survival, a rhythm of care written into instinct. Life was learning tenderness again. Even in an age of giants, below the canopy, mammals stirred. Still small, still hidden, they crept through the undergrowth with eyes bright in starlight. Some glided between branches, some burrowed, some hunted insects, and some ate fruit. A new luxury born of flowers. One fossil, the Omaia, shows fur so fine it still carries the texture of warmth. Inside her belly lay the trace of a placenta, a new strategy for life, nurture within instead of without. In that single adaptation, the future quietly turned. It is because of her kind that we exist, not as descendants of conquest, but of care. Yet, the Cretaceous world was far from calm. Its beauty existed beside constant violence. Meteor impacts still scarred the land. Seas rose and fell. Species appeared and vanished in the space of centuries. And above it all, the Earth continued its slow drift, its continents inching toward the shapes we now know. The North Atlantic opened wider. India began its long journey north, heading for a collision that would one day raise the Himalayas. Australia started to drift away from Antarctica, carrying its forests toward the sun. All this movement beneath the surface of things. And yet, the creatures above simply lived, unaware of the tectonic patience beneath their feet. Imagine now a Cretaceous twilight, the last light of day scattering gold across an inland sea. A family of triceratops moves together across the plain, their frills catching the fire of sunset. In the distance, a Tyrannosaurus watches, its breath slow, its thoughts unreadable. Overhead, pteranodons drift in formation, the wind in their wings sounding like low thunder. The flowers close for night. The air smells of salt, of pollen, of life at its fullest. The world has reached its peak, a crescendo of diversity, power, and beauty. And, as always, at the height of creation, the seed of ending waits quietly in the soil. Because not far from here, beyond the curve of sky, A rock is already on its way. A traveler from the void, cold and silent, carrying the next great silence inside it. But that is still millions of years away. For now, breathe in this warm, ancient air. The earth is alive in every color. It has learned how to sing, how to fly, how to bloom. And beneath that perfection lies the tender truth of all things that live. That to exist is to be temporary, but to be remembered is to become eternal. Dawn broke the same as any other day. The forests of the Cretaceous shimmered with dew, and the air was heavy with the perfume of blooming plants. Birds called across the canopy, their songs echoing through valleys that had never known silence. Giant herds grazed by the rivers, Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, their armored bodies glinting in the soft, golden light. The world felt eternal. It always does, until it isn't. No one knew it, but 180 million years of evolution were about to fold into a single, breathless moment. Far above the blue curve of the atmosphere, something small and distant was falling. It had traveled for millions of years through cold and darkness. A fragment of space, 10 kilometers wide, spinning silently toward a destiny written long before life itself began. It passed the moon. It entered Earth's gravity. And in less than a heartbeat, the world that had birthed giants began to tremble. The first thing to arrive was light. Brighter than the sun, it tore across the morning sky over what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. Birds scattered. Animals lifted their heads in confusion. A second later, the asteroid struck. The Earth did not roar. It screamed. The impact released the energy of billions of atomic bombs. A crater 180 kilometers wide opened like a wound in the crust. Mountains of vaporized rock rose skyward, carrying with them the air, the sea, and the future. Within seconds, forests within 1,000 miles ignited. Winds faster than hurricanes scoured the plains. Tsunamis a kilometer high raced outward through the young Atlantic, breaking upon every shore. And then, darkness, an ash that blocked the sun for months, perhaps years. Photosynthesis stopped. Temperatures fell. The bright age of dinosaurs ended not with slow decline, but in a single, blinding instant. Still, life did not die quietly. Across the ruined land, survivors clung to existence. Some birds, descendants of feathered theropods, found refuge in burrows or forests untouched by flame. Tiny mammals curled in the soil, their bodies waiting for light to return. Crocodiles sank into rivers and slept beneath the ash. Even insects endured, because the smallest lives are often the strongest. The giants could not. The great tyrannosaurs fell where they stood, their bones later to be found by hands that had not yet evolved. The herds vanished. The long necks and sails and plates became ghosts of stone. It was as if the planet had closed a book, not from anger, but necessity. For months, the world was twilight. The sky glowed with red dust. Acid rain fell and hissed in the silence. The air smelled of metal and smoke. But beneath the devastation, life began to whisper again. In the shallows, algae returned. Spores drifted like green dust on the wind. Ferns, those eternal survivors, rose first, painting scars of black soil in new color. Each sprout was a pulse, each leaf a declaration. We are not finished. The survivors crawled out, slowly, quietly. Small mammals fed on seeds and insects. Birds found their wings again in the gray light. And from those tiny remnants of life, a new chapter began. one that would eventually include you. Scientists call it the KPG extinction, the end of the Mesozoic era. 75% of all species were lost. But what remained was resilience distilled to its purest form. The Earth had reset itself. The age of reptiles had burned away, and in its ashes, warm-blooded life would rise. The mammals, once hidden, once timid, would inherit a wounded but open world. Out of ruin, consciousness would evolve. Out of silence, song would return. If you close your eyes now, you can still feel the echo of that day. The tremor beneath your feet, the faint memory of a sky filled with falling stars. But listen closely, and you will also hear what came next. The sound of rain cooling the fires, the rustle of leaves returning, the heartbeat of the planet, slower, softer, but still steady. Even endings have their own kind of peace. Every extinction is a clearing, a breath taken between symphonies. The dinosaurs may have fallen, but the earth kept dreaming of fur, of flight, of language, of you. And as the world begins again, the air warms, the forests regrow, and the night fills with the first mammalian calls. Small, fragile, persistent. The next dawn belongs to them. The next chapter belongs to memory, to adaptation, to minds that will one day look back and tell this story in whispers as you are hearing it now. The world was quiet again. Ash had settled into valleys like sleep, and rivers carried the ghosts of forests to the sea. But beneath that stillness, the soil was alive with seeds and heartbeat. What the dinosaurs lost, life was already ready to rebuild. At first, there was only gray. Gray skies, gray dust, gray silence, then came green. Tiny shoots pushed through the ash like thoughts returning to a mind after grief. Ferns rose first, then shrubs, then trees with thicker leaves. The air warmed, rains returned, and in those humid pockets of renewal, the survivors woke. Small mammals scurried beneath fallen trunks. They were no larger than rats, but their minds were bright with curiosity. They remembered how to burrow, how to hide, how to wait for light. Where the giants had relied on power, these new creatures relied on memory. And memory, it seems, endures better than muscle. They were warm-blooded, quick, restless at night. They ate what the earth offered: insects, fruit, seeds. Their young were born small and helpless, and so they learned the most revolutionary instinct of all: care. Evolution had discovered tenderness. Within 10 million years, the world was green again. Birds sang where there'd been ash. Rivers sparkled where fire once flowed. And mammals began to experiment, stretching into forms the planet had never seen. Some took to the trees, developing grasping hands and curious eyes. Others became runners on the open plain, their limbs lengthening, their lungs growing strong. In the oceans, a few returned to water, their bodies reshaping into sleek torpedoes that would one day become whales. Evolution was no longer a whisper. It was a chorus. This was the Paleocene and Eocene, a time when forests covered nearly every continent and the air was thick with warm mist. Palm trees grew near the Arctic Circle. Crocodiles swam through what is now London. It was a greenhouse Earth, lush, strange, and glorious. The mammals multiplied into shapes of every kind. Hoofed creatures, the ancestors of horses and deer, grazed in herds. Predators like creodonts prowled the shadows, sleek and silent. Tiny primates leapt through the branches, their eyes wide, their hands soft and gripping. And far beneath them, in burrows and roots, shrews and moles kept the soil turning, feeding the world from below. The planet was once again a living network, a web of movement, breath, and exchange. Every heartbeat fed another. Among the most beautiful creations of this era was the return of sound. After the impact silence, the earth found its voice again. The chatter of birds, the bellow of early mammals, the whisper of wind through new leaves. These were not just noise, but memory made music. Sound itself was healing the planet. When you listen to the wind tonight, you are hearing the echo of that healing. Every breeze through trees is an ancient song still being sung. Then came a shift again, slow but profound. The continents kept drifting, the climate began to cool. Grasses evolved, replacing ferns and palms on the open ground. With them came new animals built for distance, runners, migrators, herders. The era of motion had begun. From forests to plains, from canopy to savanna, the earth was teaching its creatures to move together. Herd became family, migration became memory. And through those long journeys across grasslands and mountain passes, life discovered the power of collective endurance. In time, some primates climbed higher into the trees and looked out. They saw not just branches, but distance, depth, possibility. And in that moment of seeing, something shifted forever. Their hands were made for grasping, but their minds began to grasp as well. They learned tools, language, memory beyond instinct. They saw patterns in stars. They dreamed before they had words for dreaming. From these early primates, small, bright, curious, would one day emerge the line that leads to us. But in this moment of the story, they were still children of the forest, sleeping under leaves, drinking from streams, listening to the same earth you hear now. The planet had reinvented itself again. It had known fire and ice, stone and storm. And yet, through it all, its pulse remained steady. Warm blood beat where cold scales had once been. Intelligence rose from instinct, affection from hunger, and the earth, this ancient mind of matter, kept learning how to feel. Every creature, every heartbeat, every breeze was a new version of its memory, a planet relearning love. Close your eyes. The fires of extinction are long gone. The world breathes again, green and gold. Somewhere in the forest, a small primate wakes and looks up through the branches at the moon. It does not yet know why it feels something in its chest when it sees the light, why its fingers tighten around the bark as if to hold on to the moment. That feeling, that tremor between wonder and recognition, is the beginning of us. The earth has dreamed of many things, but this was its most fragile dream yet, to become aware of itself. The forests of the Eocene shimmered under golden light. Mist hung low between the trunks, carrying the scent of wet bark and ripened fruit. The air hummed with insect wings and bird song, and somewhere amid that living maze, eyes were watching. Not out of fear, not hunger, but awareness. A spark of thought had appeared in the branches. They were small creatures, no larger than cats. Early primates, our distant ancestors. Their hands soft and precise, their tails curling for balance, their faces forward-looking, curious. They lived in the canopy where the world was light and shadow, leaping from branch to branch through columns of green air. Every jump a calculation, every landing a lesson remembered. Their brains grew not from power, but from play. They learned the shapes of leaves, the weight of fruit, the sound of predators moving below. They began to see the world not just as survival, but as pattern, a rhythm to understand and anticipate. That was the beginning of imagination. Somewhere deep within those small, bright skulls, neurons began to fire in ways that mirrored reality. The brain built tiny models of the world, predicting what might happen next. It was the first simulation, the earliest dream. When one of them reached for a branch in the dark and found it without looking, that was memory speaking. When another hesitated before jumping, seeing in its mind the danger of a fall, that was foresight. And when two of them groomed each other under the dusk light, not out of need, but out of trust, that was emotion. The quiet revolution that would make everything else possible. Across millions of years, those small hands became more skilled. They cracked seeds, shaped twigs, even used stones to open shells. The forest, once just a home, became a teacher. And the mind, once only a mirror, became a tool. Every invention was an echo of thought refined. A gesture turned into habit, habit turned into tradition. The first culture was not fire or language, it was care. One hand reaching out to another and being met. The earth watched this unfold patiently. The continents were almost where we know them now. The Himalayas had begun to rise from the collision of India and Asia. Mountains exhaling clouds into the upper atmosphere. Ice spread again across the poles. The planet was cooling, testing its new children with change. As forests thinned, some primates came down from the trees. They walked upright for short distances, perhaps to see over tall grass, perhaps to carry food, perhaps simply because balance had become memory. The horizon widened. For the first time, they could see the distance, the line between earth and sky, and something inside them longed to cross it. Scientists believe that by this time, around 25 million years ago, the great apes had begun to diverge. Orangutans in the east, gorillas and chimpanzees in the west. And somewhere in that quiet branching of fate, the early hominins, the ancestors of humans, took their first uncertain steps into history. They were not yet us. But in their minds flickered the same electricity that fills yours now. Curiosity, wonder, fear, love. Each spark carried forward across generations, refined by trial, expanded by memory. The earth had built a creature capable not only of adapting to change, but of noticing it. Imagine an evening in that distant Africa. The light soft and amber, shadows of acacia trees stretching long across the grass. A small group gathers near a stream. They drink, they rest. One lifts a stone and examines it, turning it over and over as if searching for meaning in its shape. It is not yet tool or weapon. It is an idea in its infancy, a thought waiting to take form. Above them, the first stars begin to appear. They look up. They do not yet know what stars are, but they feel their pull. Something inside recognizes their rhythm. That feeling, that moment of wonder under the infinite, is the birth of the human mind. The world did not notice. Volcanoes still erupted, rivers still flowed, seasons turned without ceremony. But somewhere in that vast indifference, awareness had bloomed. Life had looked back at itself and whispered, "I am." It's difficult to know when consciousness truly began. Perhaps it was when one creature mourned another, or when it painted the world with meaning for the first time. But whatever moment it was, the planet shifted quietly in its orbit. and everything changed. No longer just biology, but story. No longer just survival, but memory. You carry that inheritance in every breath. The way your eyes follow light, the way your thoughts drift in dreams, the way silence makes you search for connection. These are ancient instincts, born in the canopy and tempered by time. You are not separate from those first dreamers. You are their continuation, their mind made infinite. So tonight, as you drift between waking and sleep, imagine yourself sitting beside them. The air warm, the stars new, a distant river murmuring through grass. A hand reaches toward yours, rough, curious, alive. You take it, you breathe, you remember. The dream of consciousness has just begun, and it will carry the earth into its next awakening. A world of firelight, art, and the first human word. The grasslands shimmered under a pale sun. Wind moved through the tall blades like a slow sea, whispering in tongues no one yet understood. The forests that once ruled the earth had drawn back, and in their place stretched vast, open plains, a stage for a new kind of life. Here, in the ancient valleys of Africa, the first humans walked. Their feet pressed patterns into dust, their shadows long against the light. They were not the strongest or fastest creatures alive, but they carried something more powerful than muscle or claw: imagination. They began as wanderers, gatherers of roots, hunters of small prey. They watched the movements of stars, the timing of rain, the migration of herds, and in watching, they learned. Awareness had become intelligence. Instinct had become strategy. Every tool they shaped from stone was a thought made solid. A blade chipped from flint, a hammer carved from bone, a rhythm of strikes echoing through the canyon air. The first tools were extensions of their minds, and through them, the world began to change shape. Imagine one of them now. A woman kneeling beside a stream at dusk, a sharp stone in her hand, the light of the setting sun glinting on its edge. Each chip she removes is an idea refined. Her reflection shimmers in the water, half shadow, half fire. She is making not just a tool, but a future. Then came the most mysterious discovery of all: fire. Some say it was lightning that taught them. A tree struck, burning in the storm, its glow frightening and beautiful. Others believe it came from friction, spark born of patience and curiosity. However it began, it changed everything. Fire gave warmth in the night, protection from predators, light for work and for wonder. But more than that, it gave something deeper: a center. For the first time, humans gathered around something. The flicker of flame became the first hearth, and the hearth became home. In its glow, language took shape. Gestures became words, words became stories, and stories became memory. Every civilization, every song, every dream that followed was born from that circle of light. Picture it now, the night stretching endless across the plains. A small group huddles near a fire's orange breath. The wind hums through acacia trees. One child stares into the flames, seeing not just light, but shapes. Animals, faces, stars. The mind begins to weave. The world begins to mean. Some scientists call this symbolic thought, the ability to see not what is, but what could be. It is the birth of metaphor, the awakening of art, and perhaps, too, the beginning of wonder. With fire came expansion. Humans learned to travel beyond the familiar. to cross rivers, mountains, deserts. They carried flame with them, a fragment of the sun captured in their hands. And wherever they went, they left traces, stone tools, painted walls, bones arranged as offerings, ashes from long-forgotten meals. Every footprint pressed into the earth was a line of poetry in the planet's long story. They were not conquering the world. They were mapping belonging. In the caves of what is now France and Indonesia, they began to paint. Horses, bison, deer, shapes carved in ochre and charcoal, lines flowing with grace and memory. The walls became mirrors of the mind, a place where the invisible could be made real. Under torchlight, their shadows moved across those painted walls, joining the animals in a silent dance. Each stroke was both ritual and remembrance. It said, "We were here. We saw. We felt." It was the first human act of immortality. Language deepened, gathering around stories told by firelight. The stars above became ancestors, the wind became spirit, the rain became blessing. They named the world to keep it close, to make sense of its vastness. And in naming it, they began to dream beyond it. Somewhere, perhaps, on a night much like this one, a voice whispered the first myth, a story of creation or love or loss. And another voice answered. In that exchange, the human heart recognized itself. But even as they spread, humans carried the same fragility as every creature before them. They feared the dark, hunger, the unknown. Yet within those fears lived their genius. For every shadow demanded a light. Every loss required meaning. Every silence invited song. And so they built shelters of bone and hide, tools of wood and flint, networks of memory and faith. They began to bury their dead, not as refuse, but as remembrance. The first tenderness of civilization was not in walls or weapons, but in grief. To mourn was to understand time. By now, the earth itself had softened its breath. The ice ages came and went, glaciers carving valleys, migrations reshaping the map of life. Humans followed the seasons, crossing continents, carrying with them everything that mattered: fire, memory, and hope. They had become what no creature before them had ever been: the keepers of story. The planet, once content to turn in silence, now had a voice. And that voice could imagine the stars. Close your eyes. The fire crackles softly. The night around you hums with wind and distance. Somewhere, a storyteller's voice rises, low, rhythmic, ancient. You can almost see their face, lit by flame, eyes reflecting the movement of galaxies above. Every word they speak drifts forward through millennia, crossing languages, crossing bloodlines, until it reaches you. The story has never stopped. It only changes form, from ash to ink, from breath to thought, from memory to you. The wind moved differently now. It carried not only scent and sound, but intention, the quiet pulse of minds reshaping the face of the earth. The world that had once been wild and formless was beginning to take structure under human hands. Stone by stone, dream by dream, civilization was learning how to stand. The first builders were storytellers. They shaped not only walls, but memory. They gathered stones not for shelter, but for meaning. Circles of rock placed beneath the stars, aligned with dawns and solstices, became calendars of faith and sky. Long before writing, these were the first libraries, written not in ink, but in alignment, shadow, and light. Archaeologists call them megaliths. But to those who built them, they were conversations with the heavens. They did not simply look at the stars, they spoke to them. Imagine that first observatory, a ring of stones on a high plain, the air thin and cold, the horizon clear for miles. Torches flicker in the dusk. The builders stand silently, watching the sun sink behind a specific stone. They mark the moment, breathe together, and the year begins anew. For the first time, humanity was not just surviving time, it was measuring it. In river valleys across the world, the same awakening took shape. Along the Nile, the Tigris, the Indus, the Yellow River, the soil turned rich with memory. The rivers gave not just water, but rhythm, the predictability of flood and harvest, the pulse of civilization itself. Where there was rhythm, there was counting. And where there was counting, there was writing. The first marks were simple. Lines pressed into clay, notches cut into bone. But each one said the same thing. I was here. I saw. I remembered. From tally came record, from record came story, and from story, law, faith, and history. The earth had grown a memory beyond flesh. In Mesopotamia, villages became cities. Uruk rose from the dust. Walls vast as mountains, ziggurats stacked like stairways to heaven. Atop those steps, priests watched the stars and read the language of the sky. In Egypt, the Nile turned sand to gold. Pharaohs built tombs that reached for eternity. The Great Pyramid stood not only as monument, but as heartbeat, aligned so precisely with the cardinal stars that it might as well have been an instrument of time itself. Even now, when you stand before it, you feel the weight not only of stone, but of intention, the human wish to outlast mortality. Civilization was not born in comfort. It rose from flood, drought, hunger, fear. To build was to resist oblivion. Every city was a promise to the future, that chaos could be shaped, that memory could endure. In the hands of early humans, the planet began to glow. Villages lit with fires at night, smoke rising in constellations of its own. From above, the earth must have looked like a creature discovering its heartbeat. Then came metallurgy. Copper, bronze, iron. Fire learned new tricks. Tools became sharper, weapons more precise. With them came both creation and cruelty, for every advancement was shadowed by its reflection. But even war taught us something profound: the cost of forgetting. Empires rose and fell like tides. Sumer, Akkad, Egypt, Babylon. Each left behind stories carved in clay, temples half buried in sand. Each believed they were eternal. Each became a chapter. Perhaps that is what the earth has always known, and we are only learning that permanence is an illusion, but meaning is not. In the highlands of Anatolia, a city called Göbekli Tepe predated them all. Its carved pillars show foxes, vultures, lions, animals etched with devotion long before cities existed. No farms, no pottery, no kings, only worship, only the recognition of mystery. It was as if humanity, newly conscious, had built its first cathedral before it built its first home. Not to control the world, but to thank it. That instinct never left us. Every temple, every church, every mosque, every quiet circle of stone on a lonely hill. They all echo that same gesture. Hands raised towards something greater, something just beyond understanding. And yet, even as we built monuments to the infinite, we remained deeply, tenderly human. Families gathered around fires. Farmers watched the moon to know when to plant. Mothers hummed lullabies that had no words. Each action was a continuation of those first dreamers. Those forest children who once looked up at the stars and felt a question stir inside them. Picture this: night on the banks of the Nile. The pyramids, not yet ancient, their limestone faces gleaming in the moonlight. A priest stands atop a temple, holding a polished bowl of water to the sky. The reflection shows Orion rising, the same constellation the builders used as their map. Below him, the river flows quietly, carries silt, life, and time. The priest whispers a prayer, not for conquest, but remembrance. He is speaking for all of us, the wish that what we love will not be forgotten. As centuries pass, the cities will spread like constellations across the continents. Language will multiply. Trade will weave the world together. And human thought will begin to stretch beyond Earth itself, into the abstract, the eternal, the divine. But here, in this age of stone and sky, it is enough to know this. We learn to leave marks. We learn to name our days. We learn that to build is to remember. The earth, through us, has begun to write. The earth was awake. Its surface shimmered with light. Fires, torches, and dawns reflected in rivers that divided kingdoms. What began as circles of stone and whispered prayers had grown into empires. And humanity, the child of forests and stars, had learned how to shape destiny with its own hands. But every spark of greatness carried a shadow. For to build on such a scale, one must learn not only creation, but control. And control is a fragile art. From the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates came voices in cuneiform. Pressed into clay by reeds dipped in memory, there were laws and ledgers, hymns and harvest lists, records of who owned what and who owed who. In those small impressions lay the beginning of civilization, the transformation of story into structure. In Egypt, the Nile gave birth to permanence. The river's rhythm became the calendar, its floods, the measure of faith. Pharaohs ruled as gods in human form, their tombs towering like punctuation marks between heaven and sand. Every monument, every statue, every hieroglyph was a declaration that life could be immortal if written correctly. And yet, even stone crumbles. Even the divine must decay. To the east, along the Indus, cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa flourished with astonishing design. Streets straight as geometry, drains that carried water beneath the earth, a civilization built not on conquest, but on balance. No palaces, no grand temples, only order, as if their true faith was symmetry itself. We know little of their words, for their script remains unreadable. But perhaps it doesn't need to be. Their silence is eloquent enough. Somewhere in those baked bricks still lingers the hum of intention, the wish to live cleanly, harmoniously, quietly. Further east, in China's fertile plains, rivers birthed dynasties that measured time in millennia. They built walls to tame the wind, cast bronze bells that still sing when struck. Their scholars recorded the movements of the heavens, linking emperor and cosmos with ink and ritual. Every dynasty saw itself as eternal. Each was proven wrong. But through their rise and fall, an idea persisted stronger than any crown. That order itself could be art. Even now, the character for human in Chinese, Ren, is made of two lines leaning on each other, like one being holding another upright. Perhaps they always knew. Civilization survives not through power, but through connection. And westward, across the Mediterranean, New stories were being written. Greece began to think. Its philosophers wandered through olive groves, asking questions the gods could not answer. What is truth? What is beauty? What does it mean to be alive? Their words, logos, psyche, cosmos, still echo in your language today. They sought not just survival, but understanding. The mind, like the body, demanded movement. Meanwhile, in Rome, the world learned architecture. Stone turned to empire, roads laced continents together, and law became a new kind of scripture. Aqueducts carried water across mountains. Amphitheaters roared with spectacle and blood. They called it Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. But peace enforced by conquest always trembles beneath its own weight. Empires are living things. They grow, breathe, and die. Each one leaves bones, columns fallen, scripts half erased, gods renamed but never forgotten. The dust of Babylon rests on the same wind that carries modern sandstorms. The marble of Greece became the limestone of cathedrals. The gold of Egypt circulates in rings, still worn today. Everything humanity builds returns to the earth eventually, but never without a trace. For even in collapse, there is continuity. Every culture gives something to the next, a word, a melody, a way of shaping time. The myths of Gilgamesh became the echoes of Homer. The philosophies of Athens found rebirth in the libraries of Baghdad. Knowledge flowed like a river from civilization to civilization, never stopping, only changing course. And through it all, one truth remained constant. We are always searching for permanence in an impermanent world. Imagine standing amid the ruins of an ancient city, columns fractured, dust shimmering in late sunlight. Wind moves through archways where voices once sang to gods now forgotten. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear them still. Builders, poets, merchants, mothers. Their lives now grains of dust carried through time. But listen closer, and you'll realize something astonishing. They never really vanished. Every heartbeat you carry, every language you speak, every tool, every thought is built upon their foundation. You are their continuation. The ruins are not endings. They are mirrors. And perhaps that is the most humbling truth of all, that every empire is temporary, but every idea is eternal. When cities fall, the stars remain. When monuments fade, memory endures. And though the earth has watched 1,000 civilizations rise and crumble, it still listens for the sound of humanity's next attempt to reach the sky. The night deepens. The lights of ancient cities fade one by one. Only their echoes remain, drifting into the dream of time. But beyond them, a new kind of dawn begins to stir. A quieter brilliance made not of stone, but of thought. The age of reflection, the birth of philosophy, faith, and art. The invisible architectures that outlast even mountains. The stars had watched empires rise and crumble. But now, for the first time, humanity began to look back at them with understanding. No longer merely symbols or gods, they became questions. Mirrors of curiosity hung across the dark. The outer world had been mapped in stone. Now the inner world was opening like a new continent. The age of faith and philosophy had begun. In the deserts of the Near East, prophets spoke of invisible order, not the power of kings, but of something vast, eternal, unseen. They said the universe was not chaos, but creation, woven with purpose. People gathered around firelight, listening to words that named the unnameable. and those words shaped the air. Scripture was born, first oral, then written, passing from voice to tablet, from parchment to heart. It gave meaning to suffering, pattern to time, and hope beyond the horizon of death. Faith, in all its forms, was humanity's answer to uncertainty, a declaration that there is more than what the eyes can see. In India, under groves of banyan trees, thinkers sat in stillness, listening not to gods, but to the self. The Upanishads whispered, "The universe is within you. Every breath, every thought, every heartbeat, a reflection of the infinite." Through meditation, they sought not conquest, but understanding, a kind of science of the soul. They realized that to know the self was to know everything. And so, stillness became revelation. Farther east, in China, the sages of the Tao walked along riverbanks, their footsteps dissolving into water and reflection. They said the world is not a problem to solve, but a flow to move within. The Tao Te Ching spoke in paradoxes: softness stronger than hardness, emptiness more useful than fullness. From those riddles came clarity, the wisdom of balance. To live rightly was to live lightly, to let the world be what it is. And somehow, in that letting go, peace became possible. Across the Aegean Sea, a man named Socrates walked through Athens, asking questions so simple, they undid certainty. What is justice? What is virtue? What is truth? His students followed, writing his words in wax and memory. Plato turned them into dialogues, each conversation a mirror held to the soul. And from those dialogues, a new world was born, the world of reason. Aristotle followed, measuring, classifying, naming. He saw in every leaf and bird and cloud a pattern of logic, a geometry of life. To understand nature, he said, was to understand the divine mind that shaped it. But philosophy was not only Greek. In Persia, Zoroaster spoke of light and shadow, of a universe defined by moral choice. In Israel, prophets dreamed of covenant, of justice written in heart rather than law. In Egypt, priests mapped the afterlife as carefully as they mapped the stars. And in every corner of the ancient world, human beings were inventing eternity. They were no longer content to survive. They wanted to mean something. They wanted their lives to resonate beyond their lifetimes. And so they wrote and built and prayed and wondered. Art, too, was evolving. The human face began to appear in sculpture, not idealized gods, but individuals. Painters filled tombs and temples with scenes of work and love, of celebration and loss. Music grew from ritual into emotion. A flute carved from bone, a harp strung with gut, a drum echoing heartbeat. These were humanity's first symphonies of self-awareness. The world had learned not only to exist, but to express. And above it all, the sky remained unchanged. Still the same stars that watched the first fires, still the same constellations carved by imagination. But now, the watchers had words for them, names, myths, calculations. Astronomers in Babylon and Alexandria charted their movements with astonishing precision. They saw patterns, retrogrades, eclipses, seasons. And from those patterns, they built calendars, temples, and hope. The earth was no longer merely home. It was a system, a part of something vast and beautiful. The scientific mind had opened its eyes. It is strange to realize that all this, faith, art, logic, wonder, was born from the same spark that once kindled a campfire in the dark. That flame had grown into cities, libraries, and constellations of thought. Humanity had learned how to turn curiosity into cosmos. And yet, through all its progress, it never lost the need for awe. Even the greatest thinkers looked to the heavens and fell silent. Imagine, if you will, a night 2,000 years ago, somewhere on a hill, a philosopher sits beside a small flame, scrolls scattered around him. He looks up from his notes, not at his words, but at the stars. He knows their names, their distances, their rhythms, and yet he feels something deeper, not knowledge, but wonder. He realizes that to understand the universe is not to own it, but to belong to it. And for a long moment, he simply watches, breath rising, thought dissolving into starlight. That moment has never ended. Every time you pause beneath the night sky, every time you feel the weight of the infinite and the warmth of your own small heartbeat, you are part of the same realization that knowledge and faith, logic and beauty are not opposites. They are the two lungs of the same breath. The breath of understanding, the breath of being, the breath of earth thinking through you. And soon, this thought, this awakening, will change everything again. Because once the human mind learns to question the universe, it will eventually begin to question itself. And in doing so, it will invent something astonishing, the future. The world had been imagined in stories, painted on cave walls, mapped in stars. But now, humanity wanted to see it. Not as myth, not as symbol, but as something real, tangible, measurable. Curiosity had become motion. At first, it was small. Fishermen pushed beyond sight of shore. Merchants followed rivers into foreign valleys. Caravans crossed deserts, guided only by wind and memory. Each journey lengthened the map inside the human mind. Each discovery stretched the boundaries of fear. In China, inventors found that a sliver of magnetized iron would always turn north. The compass, a device so humble, it quietly rearranged the world. For the first time, direction itself could be trusted. The earth had given humanity not only land and sea, but orientation. Soon, ships began to leave their familiar waters. They traced the curve of coastlines, then, daringly, crossed the open blue. The ocean was no longer barrier, it was invitation. Sails filled with wind, timbers creaked, and the horizon ceased to be a limit. The stars became highways. The world, once infinite in imagination, was suddenly finite in reach. Think of the first sailors who crossed entire oceans without knowing what waited ahead. The fear and beauty of that gamble. Every sunrise was both promise and warning. Every sunset a question. Will we return? They didn't yet know how vast the earth truly was. But they knew what it meant to move toward the unknown. And that was enough. Meanwhile, another kind of voyage began. An inward one. In Europe, thinkers studied nature with new precision. They measured shadows to understand the movement of the sun, ground glass into lenses to magnify the invisible, and wrote in notebooks the way explorers once drew maps. The Renaissance dawned like a second sunrise. Art and science, long separated, merged again. Painters learned anatomy to understand beauty. Astronomers charted planets to understand divinity. Leonardo sketched flight. Galileo turned his telescope toward Jupiter and saw its moons. Proof that not everything revolved around Earth. In that moment, the universe expanded not by distance, but by humility. The center was not us. It never had been. And somehow, that realization made existence even more miraculous. In distant continents, civilizations thrived unseen by one another. The Maya traced the stars with equal mastery, building cities aligned to celestial rhythms. The Inca carved roads across mountains so vast they still defy explanation. In Africa, kingdoms flourished with gold, learning, and art. In Asia, empires rose with silk and philosophy, balancing innovation and reverence. Each corner of Earth carried genius in its own language. The story of humanity was never singular. It was a chorus of light seen from different horizons. But when those horizons met through exploration, collision followed. Trade brought riches, and conquest brought ruin. Empires stretched their sails across oceans, and the world, once boundless, began to shrink. The price of discovery was memory erased, a truth too often forgotten. Yet, even amid the violence and ambition, the thirst for knowledge deepened. Printing presses scattered words like seeds. Books crossed borders faster than armies. Ideas about physics, anatomy, chemistry, and the soul spread with unstoppable momentum. The world had entered its adolescence. Brilliant, reckless, curious, terrified of its own potential. To measure became to understand. To understand became to control, and to control, sometimes, became to destroy. Progress and peril now walked hand in hand. But step back, and you can still see the beauty beneath the noise. A ship cutting through mist at dawn, a scholar lighting a candle over parchment, an artisan shaping glass for the first telescope, a navigator tracing constellations across an unfamiliar hemisphere. Each act, though small, was a continuation of the same ancient impulse. To know, to see, to connect. It was the same light that had flickered in the eyes of those first dreamers in the forest. The same fire reflected in the stone circles of long ago. Only now, it burned across continents. The age of discovery was not just about where we went, but how we learned to see differently. The horizon stopped being an end and became a mirror. Every voyage outward reflected something inward. Every map of the world was also a map of mind. The ocean became consciousness, deep, dangerous, endless. Even now, every satellite orbiting above us, every telescope aimed into the dark, every probe sent to another planet is an echo of that same compulsion. To cross distance is to defy stillness. To measure is to wonder. Picture this. A ship at sea, 500 years ago. The night air cold, the sails taut, the stars stretch infinite above, the ocean infinite below. One sailor leans against the rail, staring into blackness. He can't see land. He doesn't know where he is. But he feels the wind on his face and the steady pull of the compass in his hand. He realizes that direction itself is a form of faith. He smiles and sails on. The world, once vast and mysterious, was becoming smaller. But the universe, the true frontier, was only beginning to unfold. The same tools that mapped the seas would soon turn toward the heavens, measuring not miles, but centuries of light. The next discovery would not be of continents, but of Nime itself, the invisible current that carries everything toward change. And as humanity learned to read that current, it would begin to glimpse its own reflection, not just as traveler, but as storyteller of the cosmos. The wind that once filled sails began to turn wheels. The same fire that warmed caves now powered cities. Humanity, restless and radiant, had learned to harness the pulse of the planet itself. The industrial age had begun, and with it, the earth began to quicken. At first, it seemed like triumph. The world became smaller, faster, brighter. Coal was pulled from mountains like black sunlight. Iron bent into rails that stretched across continents, and steam carried voices and goods farther than wind ever could. A new sound filled the air. The hiss of engines, the rhythm of pistons. A heartbeat not of nature, but of invention. In England's valleys and Europe's plains, factories rose like cathedrals. Their chimneys exhaled the new gospel, progress. Workers filed into their massive halls, feeding machines with muscle and time. Each gear turned faster than the last, each invention birthing another. And beneath the roar of production, the planet itself began to hum with tension. The dream of mastery had become reality. But mastery, as always, came with forgetting. For every wonder built, something vanished. Forests that had stood since the last ice age fell beneath saw and flame. Rivers darkened with soot. Air thickened with the breath of progress. The soil that had once grown quiet harvests now bore the weight of smoke and ash. It was as though the earth, after 4 billion years of patient balance, had been awakened too suddenly, startled by its own reflection in the mirror of mankind. And yet, the beauty of it all is undeniable. Cities glowed with fire and glass. Bridges spanned valleys that had once divided civilizations. Electricity stitched the night into brightness. The stars above were no longer the only lights in the sky. Humanity had joined them. The 19th century was a forge, a crucible of brilliance and brutality. Science advanced at a speed never seen before. Darwin traced our lineage back through eons of evolution, revealing we were not separate from nature, but part of its continuum. Faraday and Maxwell tamed invisible forces, turning magnetism into motion, motion into power, power into light, steam, steel, and circuit, the trinity of the modern age. But as factories multiplied, so too did empires. Nations stretched across oceans, claiming not just land, but destiny. Exploration became extraction. Curiosity became control. The same ships that once sought knowledge now carried chains and flags. The earth, once infinite and shared, was divided into borders and names. The age of wonder had turned into the age of ownership. Still, amid the smoke and conquest, there were those who paused to listen, poets and painters. Romantics, they were called, felt the ache beneath progress. They painted storms, wrote of mountains, and mourned what was being lost, even as the world celebrated gain. They reminded humanity that beauty is not invention, but remembrance, that awe cannot be manufactured, that a machine can mimic movement, but not meaning. Their words became resistance, soft but enduring. Every brushstroke a whisper to the future. Do not forget where you came from. By the late 1800s, the rhythm of the planet had changed. Telegraphs sent thoughts across oceans faster than a heartbeat. Trains threaded cities together like veins of iron. Airplanes were sketches waiting to take flight. The human dream was no longer to endure the earth, but to transcend it. And yet, within the hum of innovation, the old question persisted. At what cost? Workers toiled in endless shifts, their lives measured by factory whistles. Empires fought for resources they would never live to see depleted. The same fire that powered progress also forged weapons. Human genius was both creator and destroyer, blessing and curse in equal measure. The planet, ever patient, absorbed it all. Smoke, ash, ambition, its crust humming with the friction of civilization. It did not resist. It endured. But deep within, it began to stir again. Imagine a city at dusk, in the heart of the Industrial Revolution. The sky is copper, thick with soot. Chimneys stretch like fingers toward the fading sun. Trains wail in the distance, their wheels sparking on steel tracks. In the crowd below, a child pauses, looking up at the first electric light flickering to life on the street corner. For the first time in human history, night will not be fully dark. There is awe in her eyes, but also something unspoken, a question too large for words. If we can make our own stars, what happens to the ones above? By the dawn of the 20th century, the world had become a network of motion. Engines turned day into night, oceans into highways, distance into memory. The human story had entered its acceleration, but so had its reckoning. The same brilliance that built bridges would soon split atoms. The same curiosity that measured stars would begin to measure extinction. For the first time, the species that had once fought to survive the planet now held the power to destroy it. The Earth did not protest. It simply waited. It has always waited. And sometimes it forgives. Close your eyes for a moment. You can still hear it. The faint hiss of steam, the turning of gears, the whisper of smoke across sky. It is the sound of becoming, beautiful and terrible at once. The world is awake now, fully, irreversibly awake. It breathes through machines. It glows with the fire of thought. And somewhere deep beneath that roar, the same pulse still beats. The rhythm of the ancient earth, steady, patient, enduring. The 20th century began like a sunrise. Sudden, brilliant, unstoppable. Cities blazed with electric light, machines flew through the air, voices traveled through invisible waves. Humanity had conquered distance, darkness, and silence. It had become what its ancestors once worshipped, a maker of light. But every light casts a shadow. At first, the world believed in progress without hesitation. Automobiles replaced hooves, airplanes replaced wings, and radio waves replaced distance itself. You could speak and be heard an ocean away. You could fly faster than sound. You could split the atom and hold the power of creation or extinction in your hands. It was the century of brilliance and fear. The first to see itself from space, and the first to threaten its own existence. Wars burned through continents like fever. The sky above Hiroshima glowed brighter than the sun, and for a moment, humanity stared into its own reflection. A god capable of ending the world. The same species that had once huddled in caves for warmth now held the fire of stars in its grasp. We had learned to shape energy itself, but not always the wisdom to guide it. Even so, after every ruin, life persisted. Cities rebuilt, fields grew green again, and human hands, so capable of harm, learned to build anew, to send compassion through wires and airwaves, to connect voices that would never otherwise meet. The earth, despite all it endured, still forgave us enough to bloom. Then came the era of expansion. Machines multiplying, networks stretching, the hum of technology becoming the new wind. Microchips replaced muscle. Satellites orbited like artificial moons. The planet glowed at night as if it had grown a second skin of stars. For the first time, we could see the whole Earth at once. That photograph, blue, fragile, suspended in black, changed everything. No borders, no divisions, only a single living world, lonely and luminous. It was the moment humanity realized, we are not rulers of the earth. We are its memory. Science blossomed into empathy. Ecology, astronomy, quantum theory, each revealed not power, but connection. Every atom recycled from ancient stars, every breath shared with trees and oceans, every heartbeat synced, in ways unseen, to the pulse of the planet itself. And yet, even as understanding deepened, extraction continued. The engines of progress, now global, dug, burned, and consumed. Forests fell, glaciers melted, coral faded from color to bone. It was as if humanity, upon seeing the beauty of its home, could not stop touching it. And touch, even when loving, can still leave a bruise. But this is not only a story of ruin, it is also one of awakening. For the first time since the age of firelight, humans began to ask again, not just what can we do, but what should we do? Science, once a tool of conquest, became a language of care. We began to measure not only profit, but consequence. Solar panels turned sunlight back into kindness. Wind turbines sang to the sky. Oceans were mapped not for ships, but for preservation. We remembered slowly that intelligence is not domination. It is stewardship, and that wisdom begins where certainty ends. In the cities of glass and circuitry, people began to rediscover stillness. Meditation returned. Ancient philosophies met modern physics, and for the first time in millennia, the mind turned inward again. Scientists spoke of consciousness as something vast and collective, like the ocean thinking through waves. Somewhere, a quiet truth resurfaced, the same one our earliest ancestors once felt by firelight, that the universe is not a machine, but a conversation. Imagine a night in the 21st century. You are sitting by a window, high above a sleeping city. Below you, 1,000,000 lights glow, each one a person, a thought, a story. Traffic murmurs like distant rivers. Somewhere, a satellite crosses the sky, its reflection no brighter than a falling star. You take a breath. The air that fills your lungs once passed through the leaves of an ancient forest, through the feathers of birds that no longer exist, through the lungs of your ancestors. You are inhaling history. You are part of the same air that carried the dust of creation. The world is old, but through you, it is always beginning again. Technology hums softly in the background now, like a heartbeat we can't turn off. We live in a web of data and light, half dream, half reality. We can speak to someone across the planet in less time than it takes to blink. We have created artificial minds that learn faster than we ever could. And still, we look up at the stars, the same ones that guided fishermen and philosophers, and feel the same silence. Perhaps progress was never about speed or power, but about remembering what it means to wonder. Because wonder, more than anything else, is what keeps us alive. Now, as the earth warms and trembles, we stand at a strange crossroad, a moment between what we have built and what we might yet save. Every choice we make now is a conversation with tomorrow. Every act of care is a thread pulled backward through time, healing the tapestry we frayed. We are no longer children of survival. We are the stewards of memory. The earth does not ask for perfection, only remembrance, that we know how to pause, to listen, to give back what we took. to remember that this blue sphere turning through darkness is not something we live on, but something we live within. Close your eyes. The engines fade, the lights of the city soften to a quiet hum. Beneath it all, you can feel the same rhythm that has always been there. The slow, patient heartbeat of a living world. It was there before us. It will be there after us. And tonight, it is enough simply to know it's still here. Would you like me to continue into part 20? The memory of Earth, a quiet future, where the story comes full circle. Not with an ending, but with gratitude, silence, and the gentle realization that the planet was never ours to conquer, only to remember. Ban Danoi. Continue ChatGPT Danoi, Part 20. The memory of Earth, a quiet future. The world is quieter now, not silent, never silent, but gentler. The kind of quiet that comes when something vast has been understood. When movement slows, not from exhaustion, but from wisdom. After ages of noise, of engines, wars, inventions, discoveries, the Earth has entered a softer rhythm again. You can feel it if you listen long enough. The deep, slow breathing of oceans. The murmur of forests regrown where cities once stood. The pulse of wind through turbines, turning sunlight into energy without burning the world that gave it. It feels as though the planet itself has exhaled. There are fewer lights in the night sky now, but they shine with more meaning. Cities learn to dim themselves, to let the stars return. Children once again grow up seeing the Milky Way, that river of fire stretching across the dark. The same sight that guided our ancestors before language, before stone, before memory. In this quieter age, technology hums softly alongside nature, not above it. The machines have learned to mimic life, but life, patient as ever, has learned to absorb them too. Forests rise where glass towers once ruled. Whales sing again in oceans once empty. Ice returns to the poles. The balance, fragile, beautiful, is slowly being remembered. Somewhere, in a valley of tall grass and ruins, a traveler walks at dusk. The air smells of rain and pine. Between crumbled walls, vines climb over what was once concrete, their leaves catching the last light of day. Birdsong echoes through the hollow of an old skyscraper, its glass long gone. There are no crowds, no rush, no noise, only wind and time and breath. The traveler stops beside a small pool. The water is still enough to mirror the sky, and in that reflection, they see everything. The arc of history, the shimmer of stars, the memory of all that came before. They reach down, touch the surface, and ripples spread outward. Gentle, endless like thought itself. The Earth has always known how to heal. What it needed was patience, and for us to finally learn it too. For billions of years before us, and billions after, it has been a slow artist, carving, weathering, renewing. We were just its latest experiment in awareness, and now perhaps its most grateful one. The old divisions between nature and machine, mind and body, self and world, have begun to fade. The human story has folded back into the larger story of soil, of sea, of stars. And in that reunion, there is peace. Scientists, artists, and philosophers of this age no longer chase the future. They study memory, not of computers or archives, but of the Earth itself. They listen to tree rings and coral skeletons, read the carbon whispers in the ice, the magnetic pulses in stone. Every layer is a sentence in the planet's autobiography. Every fossil a word from an ancient language we are finally learning to read. We used to think progress was forward motion. Now we know it is deeper listening. The earth has always been speaking. It was we who forgot how to hear. And somewhere, in a quiet observatory high on a green mountain, a child stands before a telescope. They look not to conquer the stars, but to understand them. The lens hums softly as it tracks a small blue world spinning through the void. The child smiles, not with pride, but with belonging. For the first time, humanity sees itself not as center, but as chorus. The planet is no longer a resource, but a relative. A living library of memory, still turning, still teaching, still singing in frequencies older than sound. And if you listen closely now, beneath the wind, beneath your own heartbeat, you can hear it too. That faint vibration beneath everything. The memory of stone, the rhythm of water, the whisper of continents drifting, the laughter of stars collapsing into new light. It is not past. It is not future. It is now. The eternal present in which all things move and return. That is the true sleep of Earth. Not an ending, but an unending dream. So breathe softly. The story has come full circle. From molten birth to conscious wonder, from extinction to empathy, from fire to quiet flame. The same flame that once flickered in a cave now glows in your chest, steady and warm. You are not separate from the Earth's memory. You are one of its thoughts. A fleeting moment of awareness in a 4 billion year meditation. And tonight, as you drift into sleep, you return to that thought, back to the soil, the sea, the stars, back to the silence that is not emptiness, but everything. The story continues, as it always has. Beneath the heartbeat of time, beneath the glow of the ancient sky, the earth remembers, and in its dreaming, so do you. Somewhere between night and dawn, the earth turns once more. Not because it must, but because that is what it knows how to do. To move, to carry, to cradle. The oceans shimmer beneath the moon, their tides the steady pulse of time itself. Each wave that rises has already fallen. Each fall carries the memory of rise. And so the rhythm continues. Birth, bloom, decay. Renewal. An endless heartbeat older than the stars. You can almost hear it now, beneath your own breathing. A low, distant hum. Not mechanical, not celestial, simply alive. In this moment, there are no borders, no names, no nations, no noise. Only the soft, luminous weave of life. Fungus beneath the forest, currents beneath the sea, wind slipping through grass across forgotten plains. Each molecule shifting, each atom exchanging places like a dance too vast to witness. Everything that has ever lived is still here in some form. The carbon of ancient trees in your blood, the breath of dinosaurs in your lungs, the salt of primeval seas in your tears. You are not apart from history. You are its continuation. The dream of the earth made aware. A mist rolls over the fields. The first light of dawn touches the horizon. And for a moment, the world seems suspended between past and possible. No wars, no empires, no engines. Only dew and birdsong, and the faint shimmer of air rising warm from the soil. This is what the earth feels like when it forgives. Not because it forgets, but because it understands. Every scar, every fracture, every burned forest and broken city, they are part of its learning, part of its long, patient meditation. The planet does not seek revenge. It simply grows around the wound. It remembers and keeps becoming. And you are part of that becoming. Every dream you have is another way the Earth imagines itself. When you wonder about distant galaxies, that is the planet looking outward. When you love, that is the planet healing inward. You have never been a visitor here. You have always been home. So let the edges of thought fade now. Let your mind loosen like soil after rain. Let your heartbeat fall into rhythm with the turning of the world. Nothing is lost. Nothing is waiting. There is only motion, gentle, eternal, kind. The stars above you are older than memory, but tonight they feel close, as if leaning down to listen. They do not judge. They do not demand. They shine because shining is what they do. And perhaps that is all life has ever been. A constellation of quiet acts of persistence, each one glowing against the dark. You are one of those lights, a brief, brilliant ember in the long breath of the cosmos. Sleep now, and let the ancient earth turn beneath you. Let the waves, the wind, the orbit, carry your thoughts where time cannot follow. You are safe here. You are remembered. You are part of everything that endures.